Hello and welcome back to the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. It's me, Mark, and as you will see, I'm on my own hosting this one, so I'm going to have to hold the fort. The guys can't make it. I think Jamie's on a call out in Didcot. Craig has got a member of staff who's unwell, and Richard's stuck on a train. But I am joined by Kevin Sparrow from EAL. So how are you, Kevin, first and foremost?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, thanks for having me. Slightly nervous, I must admit, but great to be here and looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. So, for those of you who are listening, this is 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. So, Kevin's in his own time now having a chat with us just to try and share a bit of knowledge about EAL and his own background. I really do appreciate that, and all the guests who come on to have a chat with us. Before we get into the EAL aspect of your current role, Kevin, how did you start in the industry? What's your background?
Well, I started, left school when I was 16, did a number of jobs, and one of them was actually working in a record shop. So, not the traditional apprentice. And I think when I got to about 21, 22, I thought, well, I better, learn a trade, learn a profession. And I had a friend who was an electrician, and he was doing quite well. So just really that was what made me select that occupation. And I was too old to be an apprentice at the time, as far as I understand. But I trained with a family member and worked on a variety of installations, commercial, industrial, offices, warehouses, and shops. He had done a very good time served apprenticeship, so I was very lucky to learn those sorts of skills and containment systems and all that kind of wonderful stuff, which we all do. And yeah, did that for 4 or 5 years. Um, Also did my part one qualification, part two qualifications. They were the sort of staple qualifications at the time. Really liked electrical theory. I had a really good teacher as well down at Northbrook College, and got a distinction in my science and principles. And
Awesome.
I never knew I had a brain, you see. So I kind of left school like most people. So it's my second. It was my second time into education. So that gives me a lot of passion as well for the young people coming in straight from school, but also those people who do go back and retrain and just finding their footsteps. And really from there, I then progressed to work in a maintenance company. So that involved predominantly being stuck in traffic jams, driving across the south coast of England, doing a lot of reactive maintenance out of hours, supermarkets, pubs, which was always interesting. Fault finding in a pub on a Friday night when the lights are out and everyone's drunk. It's very interesting. You can bet. I would always think, right, where's the nearest, light fitting hanging off the wall? Because usually someone's bumped into it in the old pubs, not so much these days. Yeah, commercial kitchens, all sorts of hotels and all the rest of the stuff, all the rest of it. Um, from there, I did my original 2391 qualification. I think we're all familiar with these numbers.
Yeah.
And I know you talked about these on the previous podcast. And then purely through, I was also doing a lot of periodic inspection testing. I think the housing market was quite buoyant at the time, so I was doing a lot of change of occupancy, PIRs, and initial verification for another contractor. And please stop me, Mark, if this is too much detail.
No, no, keep going. This is exactly what we need to hear. Carry on,
Excellent,
please.
excellent. My life story. So yeah, from there, I think basically, well, what happened? Bane of most people in construction, it was back injury. It got so bad I couldn't walk. And it was on and off, and I tried to ignore it. So that basically took me out of the construction sort of sector. I was doing very well at it. It was a great time to be in the industry as it is now. So really, how I got my next stage was teaching. Just by chance, I was chatting to an old lecturer of mine, and then through that, I managed to secure a full-time teaching job at Chichester College, which was absolutely amazing. Great colleagues down there, and I can name some. I'm talking about them in a good light. Mike Marinan was one excellent tutor. Kevin Weller, Ian Willett, great, really great gang of people. So I was teaching 2360 Part 1, the electronics. So in many cases, what you do, obviously in the workplace, you forget some of the intricacies of base emitter collector
Yes, sure do.
of things like this. In many instances, it's going back and relearning that stuff. But I knew I really did have a passion for the regulations and the theory. Some electrical formulas will be forever ingrained in my mind, like inductive reactants, etc. So yeah, with that, I then did my assessor qualifications, internal quality assurance qualifications, certificate in education. I then I wanted to do the design and verification qualification because I was always had a passion for learning new things. So I went to do that a centre in the south because that's where I'm based. If I may name them, Brian Scaddens
Of
was the
course, yeah.
centre.
Yeah.
Okay. And Brian, who's an author, great author of textbooks,
Legend. A legend.
yeah, absolute legend. And he was actually teaching at the time, you see. So
Wow.
it was great to meet this person, this Brian in person. They always say don't meet your heroes, but there you go. No, he lived up to it, absolutely. Great guy. And but I think because not to be boastful, I had a good sort of head of theory. So I did turn up and enroll on the course, then go back and sit the exam because I kind of knew that kind of process inside out, and I was quite familiar with the wiring regs, more so than I am now, I must admit, because unless you do it all the time, you tend to lose the you become
Get a bit rusty, don't you? I think it's fair to say we all do from time to time.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. So it's when they change terminology, you really got to keep on top of it. And really from there, I think I was very lucky. Brian asked me, he was chief examiner for the 2391 award. So I ended up becoming a marking examiner for the original 2391 award,
Oh, wow.
which was being sent exam scripts, old school exam papers, and
You might
marking
have seen
those.
mine back in the day. It might have come through your desk.
Possibly. And yeah, so that was good. And they were quite difficult papers at the time. Yeah, it's great. It's great to meet the people in that network. Great set of experts amongst that. And then from there, so I was teaching 2391 at Chichester College as well. I had evening students. I did 3 groups a year of those. Really, really good. And it's nice because a lot of them were very experienced contractors. So you really have to kind of demonstrate you know what you're talking about, and then I'll teach them over a term as well. So really integrate that sort of practical within the theory, which is really important. So I talk about, for example, insulation resistance one night. We talk about resistors in series and parallel, and then taking them into the workshop, showing what that looks like in practice. Those sorts of things. So I think fundamentally, students will be doing that now, and then going back, looking at what that means in terms of calculations and all the rest of it. So
Bringing it to life,
um,
I guess that's the hard part of teaching, isn't it? Bringing it out of a textbook into the real world.
100%, and that is it, and that's the beauty of the tutors with that passion to explain that and unpack those things for the learners, which is really good. And one of the things I did enjoy, and I must admit, because I recognise this in myself, going back, in my early 20s, was learners who had come back to education, certainly adult learners, who kind of didn't do very well in education the first time round. And I think when I was teaching, they could have come through the education system in the 70s and schools, it was different then.
Hmm.
So it was what I found really rewarding was really helping those people to believe in themselves and make them realize they do have what it takes. And they're the people I did try and spend a lot of time, with and I always had students come back and thank me, and even years later I'd see students. So that's very rewarding.
That is so cool, and credit to you for doing that because it is much needed. You made a point earlier on about the different routes into industry, and in construction we do have that, don't we? We've got people who come through the academic route and then straight to us, and then people like yourself who come back in a little bit later on. So being able to blend our training regime to match that is quite difficult. But
Yeah.
having great lecturers like you stepping forward and making that happen, full credit to you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. It's most kind. And yeah, and that's what it's all about. And I think the beauty of it's the sort of education system now is that adults can go back, can become an apprentice, and the industry is much more focused on that route into apprenticeships, whether it's for young people or adults. And that's what employers wants, and that's what the industry definitely needs. But also recognizing there are other routes in. We've got the experienced workers and so on and so forth. So absolutely having those real credible, valuable routes into the industry, definitely. And I'll just if my sort of monologue of my life's history to where I am now, I can continue if you like to.
Yeah, carry on.
Give
Let's
you a
take it
bit.
to present day, and then
Um,
we'll see where you're at.
okay, yeah. So I'll try and give you the short version. So I think I was at Teachers College for about 5 years, number of qualifications delivering, as I already said. Then, just by chance, I put my CV for question writing at EAL, who I work for now. EAL are an awarding organisation. We specialise in engineering and manufacturing. That's our kind of anchor. Within that, we have the building services, engineering, mechanical engineering trades as well, like heating, ventilation, gas, plumbing, and heating. But we also specialise in some project management and those sorts of things as well. Um, so trying to sell EAL there, but you get the point.
Yeah, well, no, we'll come back to EAL. So that's kind of your career path to where you are right now, then I guess, and it's quite a wide spectrum. You've seen pretty much all of the industry. It's fair to say you've been active out on the tools. You've been in education, and now you're sat on the other side of that fence, setting some of these courses out for education to deliver and
Yeah,
people to go off and take the courses. So I can't think of someone who's maybe got a broader spectrum of insight than yourself.
I know. Yeah, it's quite rare. I think I guess in that context, but I always think back, and certain things are always true in terms of how the process of how people learn. I guess the fundamentals of electrical installation. So yeah, I always draw upon that, and it's great to obviously speak to employers like yourself, Mark, and I've chatted to some other employers recently with developments I'm doing. Yeah, so it's used drawing on those experiences to really develop really fit for purpose qualifications
Hundred
that do,
percent.
yeah, that do meet the needs of industry. But what I'm also always strive for is don't look back in terms of what I did. It's always looking forward as well. So
That's a
so for
really
example,
important mindset because what's happened, things are different going forward. It's different societal issues as well as education and industry issues. So you have got to look at the picture looking ahead. And you made a good point about the trainers as well, giving a shout out to lecturers you've worked with in the past, because we do have challenges in industry. And often
yeah,
all we ever hear about is those challenges. And it's important to recognise that there is bucket loads of really good people working in education and in a lot of these industry bodies doing really hard work to help improve things for everybody. And sometimes we don't put enough of a light and focus onto that. So that was a great shout. I really liked that.
yeah. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's definitely important to recognize really the decent people you work with who are still out there, and also because you learn from them as well. They have different life experiences and different viewpoints, so it's great on that sort of journey, that work journey, if you like.
True.
Um, so
So
yeah, sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, what's your actual job title now then at EAL? What's your specific role?
Well, my current title, I've had two roles at EAL, one of which I did for I think around 15 years because I loved it, which was developing qualifications. I've done numerous projects I could talk about. Hopefully, many of which your listeners would have done or would be delivering. But I'm now secured since March this year a new position as industry and portfolio manager for building services engineering. So it's overseeing the electrotechnical suite of qualifications. So you may think of that as obviously, yes, your apprenticeship, your CPD, inspection and testing, wiring regulations, the things we're all familiar with. But we've also got within that, for example, new qualification. covering level 3 design and installation of electrical energy storage systems. We have fire and security. So in recent years, I've developed a suite of CPD and apprenticeship qualifications with a partner, if you like, within the industry, the FSA, Fire Security Association, which Dr. Tom Brooks, I'll give him a good name drop.
Yeah, Tom, I
And
think is he from Zeus Training from memory, and he's chair of the FIA, is he, or the FAI, however it's
yes,
lined
yes,
up.
yes, that's it. So yeah, and also some of your listeners might see his Dr. Zeus article in Professional Electrician Installer magazine. Yeah, so they're really good. So we developed awards with him. Passionate about in terms of within that technical sphere. So we've got BS 583 Part 1, 5839 Part 1. So non-domestic fire alarms. We've got a new qualification for domestic dwelling fire alarms. So really good CPD for electricians as well, and a
Yeah,
host of others that I can talk about. So
yeah, we'll get to that. So it sounds like you're covering electrotechnical and mechanical areas of industry, and that's just beyond electricians' standard qualifications we'll all be familiar with. So you're a big body, if you like. You're coming forward doing that. So in terms of EAL itself, what actually is it? What does EAL stand for? What does it do? What purpose does it serve? And I guess for something that people in our industry might understand, what does it compare to? So I'm thinking straight away, without wanting to insult you, by saying the
no,
competition's
absolutely
name,
fine.
City and Guilds.
No, absolutely. No, I'm glad. It's like the elephant in the room. Absolutely, it's good. I think, yeah. So EAL, what are we in a nutshell? I guess in 2 words in England, is an awarding organisation. So within Wales, they refer to them because there's a different regulator within Wales, so they'll call us an awarding body. So yeah, we're fundamentally the same thing. And exam board, if you like. So if you think about some of your younger learners, if they've done GCSEs, they probably think of GCSE, oh, okay, I'm going to do a GCSE. They probably don't think about which exam board it's with, whether it's AQA, you know,
Is it
Pearson's or
EdXL and other ones like that? I
EdXL.
remember from when I did them, there's a few, isn't there?
Exactly,
It was
because you
just the
don't worry
grade that
about that.
mattered. It didn't matter what the awarding body was.
Yeah, you've got enough stress, thinking about exams, no matter who's marking it. But ultimately, you're working to the same set of syllabus, the same standards. You've got all awarding organisations; they're regulated.
So
So,
who
for
does that
example,
regulation? Just for the apprentices who may be listening, what kind of sits above City and Guilds and EAL? I assume there's something up there that you both have to report into.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think half our life or half the work life is dealing with those regulations and rules and different bodies and entities. So yeah, we have within England Ofqual. Um, so they'll regulate awarding organisations within England. So they have a lot of powers because they can take away the license, if you like, of an awarding organisation. They can fine an awarding organisation. So you may recall, or some of your learners may recall, I think maybe last year or the year before, I think one of the awarding AOs, I'll refer to them, were late delivering exam results. And
Okay.
they got quite, I think they got
I remember
quite
that on the
hefty
news. I
fines.
do remember seeing something along those
Exactly,
lines.
exactly that. Yeah. So it's all quite high stakes stuff. All this, but behind the scenes, it's always a big operation. So I guess it's is definitely the swan analogy. It's there's always processes and things going on in the background to keep that swan moving, smoothly. Um, so we have Ofqual in England now because we have devolved nations. So within Wales, we do a lot of work within Wales, and Qualifications Wales is the regulator there. So we work quite closely with QW, we'll refer to them as, and the experts there. And we actually deliver, in terms of building services, we've actually in recent years delivered, working with City and Guilds, and people may not know this, the building services and construction qualifications. So within Wales now, all apprentices, the construction apprentices will go via City and Guilds. I mean, every single one of the building services apprentices, so electrotechnical, heating, vent, plumbing, heating, they'll all come through EAL.
Okay.
And how the regulator oversees that is because they set to us, if you like, a bit like a client specification. We want our
We all love
qualifications.
those.
Exactly, yeah. So we want our qualifications to look like X, Y, and Z. Okay, so we've come together to deliver that project, that vision for the regulator across the sector, and it's engaging employers into that vision as well. And just finally, there's a separate regulator in Scotland, and then we have SEA, another regulator in Northern Ireland. So they have similar but slightly different nuances. They have slightly different regulations, but the main theme is, you've got to have fit for purpose qualifications, engaging with employers, reviewing your qualifications as well. And within England, and I don't want to bore your listeners too much with the
No,
technicalities.
it's all good. This is going to be interesting to a lot of people because understanding what's behind a lot of this stuff we all do is missed a lot of the time. So carry on.
Yeah. I mean, I do know, speaking to employers and even centres, I mean, I say majority of the time, sometimes it's almost the awarding organisations are just changing things all the time. And I think what drives that change is usually there's an education policy set by government. So, a prime example of that, people most likely have heard about T levels, hopefully.
Yeah.
So the young learners now leaving school, we're in a consortium with City and Guilds delivering the T levels within England for building services, and also within engineering as well. So although we compete with other awarding organisations, we do come together to deliver bigger projects for the benefit of the industry, and that just
Fantastic.
because that's our footprint as well. So we do work quite closely, more than most people would realise on
It's always good to have
many
friends
projects.
in the same space of industry. I know that I talk to other electricians, believe it or not. I don't think they're all the enemy, and it must be the same at an awarding body level as well. So
Absolutely,
you need
100%
that,
that.
especially when you've got government, employers, and everyone feeding against you. So my basic understanding from what you've just said is that you're kind of in between, if you like, the training space, the employers, and then maybe government, I guess, if we're going to say that's what Ofqual and some of these other places are. And you kind of produce the courses and qualifications and then kind of dictate that to the training centres in how it's delivered. Do you get involved in that kind of aspect, and then the marking and assessing of the qualifications coming through?
Yeah, I think the first part's essentially right. Yeah, we kind of float in that space between, and you can look at it as a hierarchy. The government, and up top, the policy making and how we operate to deliver those quality qualifications. Absolutely, yes, we do care about the delivery of qualifications, but our prime purpose is around the assessment, making sure that whether a learner undertakes electrical qualification in Newcastle to Newquay, that they're assessed in the same way and
Yes.
to the same standard. It's really important, and that's one of the key themes. When we are working with our competitors as well, to give employers that confidence, because employers want that, and I'm sure you'd agree, Mark, as a contractor and employer in the industry, you want to have that consistency.
100%, definitely.
Yeah. So whether it's this awarding body or this awarding body, actually, once you strip those badges off, what it actually matters is how that learner is assessed and the processes to get to that point. I mean, EAL, our history goes back, and probably a lot of people won't realise this, to the mid 1960s.
Really? Really? So I always see, even I have to say I was quite ignorant to EAL probably
Yeah,
until the early 2000-ish. And there's other people
yes.
who are only just hearing of you in present time. So the fact that here you've existed since the 60s might be quite a shock.
Absolutely. So I guess people in that time could have potentially have been born, worked, and retired, within that time frame.
Definitely. You'd hope so. They're retired by now.
Absolutely. But the other thing to give confidence, and I thought about this is that because we do obviously we do heavily operate within the engineering manufacturing space. If you think about, okay, the engineers who build aircraft, etc. So think about it. EAL work in that space for people building aeroplanes, and of
Awesome.
course, if you're going on holiday, you want to get on an airplane that's
You definitely do.
so if
Definitely
you think
do.
about that, so we do work with some real household named engineering companies, and also within the building services sector as well. So
Cool. So I mean,
it's
just
just to
just
give you that, yeah.
just reaching back to what I just said a minute ago about kind of how you would dictate to training centres what they should be delivering in terms of the content. You don't necessarily do that. You're not sending them a list of PowerPoint slides. This is what you need to do. They've got kind of artistic license, for want of a better word, to deliver it how they want. But the assessments after that training are standardised all around England, Wales, Scotland, wherever it's been delivered.
Absolutely, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we do supply, we would call that learning support material. So, it's sometimes a tutor, or often, especially with the new qualification, they'll need, for example, PowerPoint slides or worksheets, etc., to be able to effectively deliver that qualification. And so, yes, I have a colleague, Benita. I'll give her a name, shout out. She does a great job. She's a chartered engineer as well, actually, but she develops our learning resources. And so often I'll be, emailing, contacts I know. Can you develop some, PowerPoints on insulation resistance testing, or whatever it might be. Yeah, so we do supply those, but yeah, exactly right. It's up to artistic license to be able to deliver that how they want to.
Fantastic. And just roughly speaking, you might not know off the top of your head, but how many sort of courses do EAL offer as a ballpark to give people an idea of the scale
Uh,
of what you're putting out there?
I'm bound to get this wrong. I think at
Just a
some
rough
point,
idea. We won't hold you to the nearest hundred.
it's definitely 1,000. I think we're actually I'd say about 350 to 400 mark in terms
Wow,
of
so it's quite a
qualifications.
broad range of qualifications, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you think, predominantly what we're talking here, is engineering, we're talking building services, electrotechnical, plumbing, heating, gas, heat and vent. So it's just in that footprint alone. Um, we do also offer within that endpoint assessments. So within England, EPAs as they're called, the endpoint assessment and apprenticeship. Obviously, as we know, within the electrotechnical space, we have NET, who are the EPA body with the AM2S. And that's another body we work very closely with, NET and TESP as well. I'll give them a shout. So any learners who are listening, definitely look them up, NET and TESP.
Net are a great friend of this show. They've been on. Carolyn and the team there are fantastic. So yeah, good shout.
Absolutely brilliant bunch of people, and really, really industry first. That's front and foremost, with TESP as well, and we have employers. There's employers part of that as well. Ruth Devine from SJD Electrical as well. Really strong voice within the industry as well.
100%.
So
These are superstars in our industry, and
yes,
maybe people don't know enough about them in the social media space, unfortunately. But these are people who are really directing and helping develop things to improve standards for the future. And I've spoken about TESP and NET and not a lot, and I'll drop the links to their pages on the socials in the description of this podcast as well, so you can go off and check those out. It's another good call you've made there, Kevin. They're great
yes.
groups of people.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things is, it's really important not only to know, about conduit and resistivity and things, but also learning about the industry, how the industry works, how the different, how it all fits together is really important. And just to mention, that's one of the key themes we put within the qualifications we developed in Wales. So people would learn within the qualification naturally about the ECA, the IET, competence person schemes, and how it kind of all fits together. It's really important.
It is. And there's not enough understanding of that from people coming into industry. I see that a lot in Apprentice One-to-One, that they're unaware of how all of these different bodies stitch together and what they all mean. So, focal point of information of all of that at the start is much needed. So, yeah, good shout again.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to you did ask me about EAL. It stands for Excellence, Achievement, and Learning. That's what it stands for. And
Fantastic.
we the name got flipped to that. Back in time, it was EMTRA Awards Limited, and that goes back to our history within the industry training board, engineering industry training board. So if you're familiar in construction, and you have CITB, the
Yeah.
Construction Industry Training Board. EAL, back in its the midst of time, is
Oh, really? Okay.
Engineering Industry Training Board.
Ah.
So you sort of see.
It's
So
funny how things develop over the passage of time, isn't it? That you're kind of linked, well, not linked, but an equivalent of CITB, and now you're where you are in industry in this current time.
absolutely, and like most organisations, we evolve to stay current, and I think our focus now is we're looking at renewable technologies, sustainable technologies, looking at the future, hydrogen, air source heat pumps. As I say, we've got the new battery qualification, our solar. So it's a great time for apprentices and contractors to be in the industry to learn these new technologies
Definitely. It's
as
really,
well. Yeah.
really, really exciting, but it must be very difficult for you as an awarding organisation because there is so many changes to the qualifications taking place. So there's changes in the apprenticeship standards, as we've discussed on here a few times. We've got changes around some of those retrainee routes. I've been discussing bits and pieces with you, Kevin, over the last few weeks in and around all of that. And as you've said, we've got this massive development in PV, battery storage, and producing training for it. So it must be really hard work for you at the minute.
Yeah, it is, and like most things, it's like a London bus. I'm never quiet. I don't wait, just in case my manager's listening. But certainly, three things will turn up at once. Three projects you need to deliver. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk a bit about the changes to the qualification. So this would be true for if you're doing sitting guilds or EAL. So I'm more than happy to talk, and actually, it may be hot off the press as well. So
Yeah, sure. Let's hear it.
yeah, so and I'm actually doing a webinar with the ECA in April to discuss a bit more about this.
Oh, cool.
And so for new apprentices, and this is only for new apprentices. So you're doing the level 3 electrotechnical qualification as part of the apprenticeship, mandated, and only for new apprentices. So no panic if you're already on it. There will be a requirement for or the on-site performance units for one of those evidence pieces to come from a non-domestic location. So it's not a big deal. So anyone who works solely in domestic, please don't panic. We've already set out, and TESP have already set out some communication around that. And really, it could also involve working in communal areas, in blocks of flats, or where there's HMOs, etc., or even mansions. I don't know how many people work in mansions. But there are exceptions. So it's just gaining evidence outside just the dwelling units itself. And the reason for this is because there is a qualification we have for an apprenticeship for electricians in dwellings. So there is a fairly new apprenticeship which is in that space for dwellings and is much more focused in that area, which is a really, really good apprenticeship, really good qualification as well.
I agree. I mean, it's taken a bit of heat, that one. I think it's probably been titled in a way that could have been different with the domestic electrician because of the stigma from, the domestic Part P training that took place for a while. It's a bit of a similar name, if you like, and it's totally different to that. It's something I keep re-emphasising. This is a proper apprenticeship. And as far as I was aware, the traditional apprenticeship, I know from enrolling my own apprentices in a college, we always had that discussion about the work environments you were in and the kind of cable types and containment systems you use. And if you aren't able to offer all of those things, you were kind of directed away from being able to employ an apprentice at all. So, it's kind of opening doors to employers to be able to take apprentices on and offer that training. I think it's a good thing. And the fact these courses have been developed, it gives people options at the end of the day. No one's been made to do anything. You've got the choice. I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also, as there's much more. I see I certainly see the technology, prosumers, electrical installations we know about
I'm
within
building one right
dwellings.
now in my house.
Fantastic. Oh, that'd be a good case study then.
It's going to
Um,
be, if I can make it work.
excuse me, that's I've got an electrical appliance in the background. Excuse me,
So,
please. It'll stop in a minute. Um, okay. Yeah, so within the electrician's dwellings qualification, it's a substantial qualification. It requires the on-site performance. It's very robust. Within it, there's periodic inspection and reporting as well, a requirement for that, to also raise the standard of that within the workplace. So the apprentice can obviously be supervised closely while carrying out that coding and carrying out those EICRs, which in turn, will help raise the standard of EICRs as well within the dwellings context.
that's the hope,
Um,
isn't it? That's what all this is about. I actually helped develop the standard for the new apprenticeship. I was one of the employers who consulted on it, so I'm familiar myself of what's coming, and I think it's a nice change. It's a subtle change, if you like. There's not some massive differences as far as I understand. A little bit of tweaking the funding and some of the changing in the terminology and including some awareness of the renewables stuff. I think it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good, and that's is it. And then the other thing with qualifications, and I always say to people, they're as right as they are. Then, regulation when they're launched, we review them ongoing. So there's amendments to the wiring regulations or other regulations come into force. We'll update them. So we'll always keep them current, keep them updated, which is really important as well.
It really
Um,
is, isn't it? I mean, like we say, getting to make sure that those changes are actioned as quickly as possible. It's difficult when there is that training environment in our industry. These are things of physical beings, if you like, when you've got all of the test booths and the AM test centers and things and all the changes that have to be made that map to the training regime. There does have to be a bit of a window of time, I think, just to allow that to happen. But yeah, it's fantastic, and credit to industry for making those things accessible to people. Just touching back onto EAL again in a specific way,
mhm.
how many centres do you have delivering your courses? Do you know roughly in the electrical industry? Because I would think most
Mm.
people primarily are aware of city and guilds and they are widespread around the training environment. But are you in the same colleges? Can you rock up to any training provider and ask to do an EAL course, or are you just in specific places?
Yeah, I think many, if not all, many of the colleges within UK are EAL centres. So typically they'll be delivering engineering or related qualifications. And amongst those, I don't have a number.
No, it's going to
I
be a lot, isn't it? Is
it's a
my
lot.
feeling. So I mean, this is the point I was trying to make, really, that people do have that choice with EAL and City and Guilds, and there is going to be differences in those courses. I would think you might have a different tweak on how it's needed to be assessed. Where they will map closely together. There might be some benefits one way or the other in choosing one provider or the other at the end of the day. And I'm just assuming if you do the EAL course, you're going to still qualify for your GIB Gold card. You're still going to be able to list those qualifications on the back in the same way you can your test and inspection. Does that all map across just the same?
Exactly, it is exactly the same in that regard. And that's the thing. It's a means to get to the same endpoint. Exactly that. Um, so yeah, I've just used all my experience and everything and my industry contacts to really develop the state of the art qualifications in what we do. And yeah, so often we do have a shared assessment strategy with other awarding organizations, C&G, for example. So if you're doing the apprenticeship qualification, we've already sat down and talked about how we're going to assess things in different ways. Um, and then we take that in-house to our own development teams, and we have assessment experts, and we go through quite a very almost painstaking process of developing questions and
I was going to ask you, that was one of my questions on my list, actually, how these
yeah.
things are put together and built, the process that's involved. It can't just be one person sat in a Word file typing out roughly what needs to be asked.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly it is. There'd be too much. So, for example, with a new qualification we developed for electrical energy storage systems. It was so new. There's not many people who could actually write those questions. And even trainers, tutors are trying to get up to speed in terms of how to deliver it.
It's a real issue at the minute, getting good training. I'm trying my best in that space at the minute. So to hear this is news that's golden to me.
Absolutely, but it's that chicken and egg situation. So and the same was applied to me. So I had to research to write the syllabus. So I'd write the content. So that would be me, as you described there on Word document.
Laying out the outline to it. This is what roughly needs to happen, guys.
Exactly that. So yeah, I'd reference the IT code of practice. That's always a good source of reference, of course. With these sorts of qualifications, we'd always align it to the code of practice. I'd look at MCS. They have a battery standard, so also bringing in content from that, assimilating that content in. And this is an example for this qualification. I talk to battery manufacturers, so people that manufacture the batteries, and bringing that content in. I'll speak to battery installation contractors as well. So managing to track them down through contacts and then just kind of assimilating all that content down. What are the safety, what's the technically critical aspects. So with batteries, one of the considerations, for example, is thermal runaway, DC arc flash. There's a whole host of things that people just see. It's probably like most things in the electrical world. It just sits there and just does what it does. But the engineering process of being able to, especially for electricians now, to specify those systems, et cetera, as probably you're finding yourself.
We are. It's trying to find the suitable equipment to put in certain parts of people's homes as well. I'm not a fan of putting batteries in lofts, for example, even though some manufacturers say it's totally fine.
I think I'd be on the same page as you, actually, definitely. Yeah. And but obviously, if you do that, that's the choice. Then ensuring you got the right fire detection, etc., etc. So
that's where good training comes in, isn't it? That's where you guys in the courses step in to give that CPD and knowledge to us, and we can evidence that then.
Absolutely. And then, so once we have that syllabus, I think really the next stage, and this is qualification development 101, I would say, it's developing assessment specifications. So I literally put the content on a spreadsheet, if you like, and then I just look at. I'd already had in my mind how some of this is going to be assessed. Is it going to be a written exam? Is it going to be a multiple choice exam? And within our multiple choice, I'm sure some of your listeners, if they're apprentices, will interact with these. So we got drag and drop. We have pictured questions, hotspots, a range of question types. We actually use the same exam system as our main competitor, C&G. So we both use the same exam system, and so we built. So then I developed assessment specifications that goes to my colleagues. Typically Andy and Josh, I'll give them a shout out. They have to deal with the things I throw over the fence to them. They source technical experts, or I bring them technical experts. So with the case of the battery qualification, we actually use some industry experts that I sourced and who are members of the JPEL 64 committee. I won't give names and things, but they're absolute industry titans themselves. So they did our exam bank. I've developed the practical assessment working with, so I'll develop the rigs and things like that using my own electrotechnical background. And in the case of the battery qualification, that was quite difficult. I really had to get my thinking cap on because these systems aren't designed to be in a rig. They're designed to be in a real life dwelling. So it's almost tricking the battery to think it's doing something it's not. So that
they don't like working through a 13 amp plug top in basic terms, do they? It's quite hard to get them to start charging up at full rate.
Exactly that. And then sometimes and I'll give you an example. Any of your apprentices are doing they've done their fault finding practical yet. There's a whole host of things going on in order to switch in the fault deviations, as I call them, a whole host of resistors and things that are specified to enable that to happen within the rig. So it's looking at what needs to be assessed, thinking about the knowledge, thinking about the practical skills, and then once you've developed that, testing that out. You've always got a gut feeling: is it good? Is it going to do what you want it to do? And then testing that out with employers and stakeholders and centres. And then the key thing also, Mark, just one last thing, is reviewing it over time. So once it's been put into action, is it performing? Is that assessment performing how you wanted it to? And so on and so forth. So I could talk for a long time about this.
So that reviewing process, is that kind of looking at the successful outcomes people have got, or feedback you're getting through the training environment, or is it all of those things?
It's definitely all of those things. So it could be anything from gathering data on exams. So we look at when we set exam questions now, we go through a thing called an Angoff process, and I'm sure no one's ever heard of that.
That's a good name for it.
So definitely one to Google. Look at that Angoff process. So if you're bored on a Sunday,
I've certainly never heard of that. I'm going to be Googling it after this call.
3 o'clock in the morning, just Google Angoff process. So we go through that, and it's essentially with our on-screen exam questions, it's gathering experts together and looking at really how difficult a question is, in terms of how many learners you could think would pass that question out of 10, for example, or out of 100, and then building a picture of how difficult that assessment paper is. So anyway, in terms of reviewing, we'll look at the data we get from exams. We can talk to centres as well. Absolutely, we'll talk to centres, and I really, really enjoy doing that. We will talk to, certainly with practical assessments, we'll get feedback, because we don't want them to be unmanageable. We don't want them to be too resource intensive. If there's a different way you can achieve the same output as well.
It's difficult for trainers with the funding they get allocated as well, isn't it? So that must play a part in the decision making at that level too, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really key. So yeah, we're very mindful of that. So yeah, we're always trying to be innovative as well. So rather than doing things the way that were done for 10 years previous, thinking about, can we use virtual reality? Can we do things in a completely different way?
Exciting. I guess COVID fast forwarded all of that in a way. I hate saying that word because we've forgotten about that now, but it did accelerate teaching and training in a way, didn't it?
Yeah, 100%, exactly that. And one of the things we're looking at, or we will do later in the year, we're aiming to roll out our remote proctoring of exams. I think one of your guests we've discussed this previously, or mentioned it. So that would be, for example, if you're a busy contractor, you want to do your 18th edition wiring regs exam. You can't get to the college. You know what it's like. You can't get through traffic to get there, whatever. You can do that learning remotely, or even self-study, and then sit the exam, still associated with the centre, but you could sit that exam in your own space at home, and then we will remote invigilate it. So it's moving. We're moving into the future now with these things.
The health and safety thing through ECS have moved to that now, where you can do your health and safety assessment through a similar thing. It kind of uses face tracking, I think, and makes sure you're not using your... I don't know quite how it works, but they're already on that path.
Exactly that. So, I've got colleagues, obviously, within EAL who are far more clever than I am, who deal with these matters. So absolutely. And it's really clever stuff, and
it's exciting for the future, isn't it? I think there's a big shift in training in the electrical industry going on now. It's much needed, and technology is going to play its part, isn't it? Like you said, virtual reality, who knows where we'll end up. We might all be in robotic suits in a classroom doing our 2391 assessments, who knows? But it's interesting, and I think the fast pace of industry, the fact training's reacting to that, is a good thing. I certainly support it. Is there anything else you want to add on this podcast before we end it, Kevin? Because we've reaching the end of our time limit, and people will be switching off. I don't want you wasting your time chatting to me when no one's maybe listening.
Yeah, I just want to say, look, thanks for having me. It's absolutely brilliant, and I wish all your learners every success. And it's been an absolute pleasure to come and talk to you today, Mark. So, thank you very
No,
much. That's it.
thank you for giving up your time, Kevin. I really, really do appreciate it. And I'll drop links in the description to this video and podcast to go off and read into EAL a bit more yourselves if you want to. And as we said, if you're taking your courses now and you're hitting up to a training centre and you're seeing there's an offer in from City and Guilds and EAL, they're exactly the same thing. They're going to serve the same purpose in your qualification journey. So you can rest assured that it's a good method to train as an electrician. Thank you all for listening and watching. If you've got any questions around this content, please do drop them in below. I'll do my best to answer. And until the next time, we'll see you then.